So to get us started, before we get into the interview with Josh, I just kind of want to welcome everybody to our Project X-ITE lab here. This is a co-working space designed for students across campus to come and just kind of get things done and work in here. We'll have expo markers with whiteboards galore, sticky notes of all sizes, anything you guys need to get done what you need to get done. So don't feel free to come in here and utilize this space whenever you want. And this is, like Nina said, the second installment of StudioX. So she mentioned that this is really casual, and I just want to reiterate that because the goal for this event is to give students more direct access to kind of distinguished community members like Josh. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of like start with a basic set of questions, and we're kind of going to get our momentum going. But then we want people from the audience to feel free to interrupt with questions or shout out any comments and questions that they have. So like I said, very casual. Feel free to jump into the conversation wherever you see fit. Cool. And just so everyone knows, the arc of the discussion today is just kind of is going to cover Josh's kind of rise into entrepreneurship and how he came into his career now, and what he's doing, lessons for the road for student entrepreneurs in the audience or aspiring entrepreneurs here at DU. And with that, I think we'll kind of just get started. So Josh, you started as a realtor. How can you talk about just kind of like the beginnings of your career in entrepreneurship and how you got into the space?
Sure. So my beginnings in entrepreneurship didn't start with being a realtor. It was way before that. Parents were entrepreneurs, grandparents were entrepreneurs, great-grandparents, pretty much a family of entrepreneurs. I was never told, hey, go be an entrepreneur. I was in fact like, why aren't you a doctor? Why aren't you a lawyer? Why aren't you, all that fun stuff. But back in high school, I grew up in New York. And in New York, none of you guys are from New York, are you? Oh, that explains a few things. So growing up in New York, like the mindset of New York, particularly in the city, is this mindset of money. It's a money mindset. And so like if LA, the mindset is you got to be in the entertainment business. In New York, it's kind of this money business. And just being exposed to that, my parents didn't like push that on me, but that's just part of society there. And so growing up about that, it just kind of seeps in. And so I remember walking into the bookstore and finding this magazine stand that said the 400 richest people in America. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me look at this thing. And, I start browsing through it, and I'm reading these mini snippets, these mini stories of these people who, this guy had a little potato farm, and he grew the potato farm to the next plot, hooked up a deal with this guy named Ray Kroc, and all of a sudden now he's a billionaire. It's like, okay, I could start imagining the steps between that first plot, and how did he go from that to the next, how do you end up communicating? How do you end up striking this deal with this Ray Kroc guy? And McDonald's, for those of you guys who don't know. And all of a sudden, how did this journey go? And it was fascinating. So I started creating these stories as I'm going through and filling in the blanks of what did these people have to do to kind of get to this next stage and grow? And it was just fascinating for me. I had no illusion of being a billionaire. I'm not a billionaire, not even close. But like the idea of creating something and building something was really exciting to me. So I think that was kind of the beginning. College, I was in leadership and student government, ran a car rental service out of my campus. Post-college, I was a prop trader, I traded stocks. Ended up in the entertainment business and wanted to learn that business, so I literally did every absolute shit job that there was possible in the entertainment business, and it was humbling. You want to learn everything, so at least for me, I wanted to learn everything, so I figured you have to go and do the worst jobs, and hopefully if you do those, you'll have the skills that you can understand what they're doing so that you can do the best jobs. That ended up going fairly well if you look back. Most people fail completely. I ended up producing a feature film. I produced a short film. I acted in a bunch of stuff. Eventually decided to go to California. I explored the business in California and realized I hated it. If you know New Yorkers, we kind of tell it like it is, and people in California will smile and tell you how awesome you are, and then when you turn, they'll smack you and stab you in the back. That was kind of the LA entertainment business vibe. Got out of that, got a real estate license, just because, hey, it's a good way to maybe make a couple bucks. I didn't have any predetermined path at that point. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. So tried that out. Again, another entrepreneurial venture was being a real estate agent. Was not prepared for it. Didn't really understand that you needed a lot of capital. If you had no network, you needed money to get the word out. I didn't have a network, so I wasn't very successful as a real estate agent. I also didn't like it. So I stopped, ended up starting that again a couple of years later just to see if I was right or wrong in quitting. I was right, did not like it. And ended up getting a substitute teaching credential because I needed money. And of course, teaching is something that pays you a lot of money. So this is a logical path towards building wealth, is becoming a teacher. Ultimately, I ended up getting a substitute teaching job from a girl I was dating whose mom had started this school. And the day I started doing that, the teacher I was subbing for quit. So I now had a full-time job as a teacher. Of course, the lady I was dating and her mom who had started the school are now my wife and mother-in-law. So I could not leave this job that I wasn't totally in love with, but I was completely tied to. So 4 years later, I ultimately ended up stopping. But in between, I got approached by my brother who had bought a bunch of property. He was living in the Midwest where property is cheap. And he called up and he's like, Josh, I've started to invest in real estate. Here's some of the deals. Here's some of the numbers. It's like, oh, wow, that looks great. The math is awesome. I'm going to do this. Got on a plane, flew out, looked at his properties. And I was like, oh, that's pretty exciting. Cool. So what does somebody like me do? They go and they buy property without doing anything else. They just buy it. And so I did that. Just bought some property, flew back to LA. So now I'm running these properties from 2,000 miles away. I'm teaching, working, and I get to a point, which was very, very soon thereafter, where these properties, again, another entrepreneurial venture, of course, start to have problems. And those problems were, first of all, I bought properties in as bad a neighborhood as you can buy properties in. Why would I do that? Anyone have any ideas?
Cheap.
They were cheap. Seemed really logical, didn't it? Seemed really logical. So they were inexpensive. Doesn't mean that they were cheap necessarily, right? So I bought these properties and I'm starting to have problems. And so there's turnover with tenants. It's hard to keep good tenants in bad properties and bad neighborhoods. Management is not going well. And all these issues start to happen. I'm like, what do I do? How do I deal with this? So I go and I start looking at the magazines and I look at books in the bookstore and I go on the internet and I'm looking around. What I realized was all the information that was out there at the time was connected to these guys. And I don't know if you guys have all seen these commercials on TV at night, but you too can get rich. Just come to my free boot camp this weekend where we will do nothing other than teach you techniques like how to call your credit card company and raise your credit limit so you can afford to buy the course that I'm about to pitch you on the next day. But I did teach you how to negotiate, so that was really good. And you buy that course, it's not quite enough because you're going to have to now go and buy this boot camp, which is 5x as expensive. And that boot camp is now going to get you almost there, but you got to buy this one-on-one training, which is maybe $25,000, $50,000, $75,000. And all of a sudden, you don't have any money to invest. Well, of course, I'm from New York, and so my bullshit-o-meter is like off the charts. And I don't buy the whole, I don't buy that line of learning. I don't like it. I felt it was extremely shady. And so what am I to do? Well, rewind really quick. Back in college, I was a freshman in '94. Internet was kind of born, '94, '95, graphical web. And so my brother is a couple of years older. He started playing on the web when it was just a text browser, and I was fascinated by it. So when it became a graphical, I was pumped, and I taught myself HTML, started building websites for fun, built a website for a professor. I won't tell you that story because there's some in the room. Ultimately built a small business while I was in school, made a couple bucks, ended up killing it off because I got a girlfriend and started to actually get a life outside of my computer. And lo and behold, I had the background to do this, right, to start building websites. I'm now in a situation where I don't know where to turn to. There's no resources out there for me to go to. And so I decided to build a internet forum so I could get answers to some of these questions that I was having. And so I did. I built a forum, I got some open source software, started to hack it up, started to build some resources to try and attract people, and the birth of my company was there. I'm teaching special ed, and in between, during my lunch breaks, after work, nights, weekends, I'm building this hobby business. Little by little, hobby business, it was more exciting for me at least than the teaching thing at the time. And so I just plow all my time and energy into it. It ultimately starts to grow. I ultimately quit my job, marry my boss, and I moved to Denver. And I wake up in the morning in my boxer shorts and start building this now what was once hobby business, now lifestyle business. So, get up, cross the hall, there's my computer, work away. It's pretty cool. And 6 years later, I realized that I'm now working 80 to 100 hours a week. And I hadn't taken a day off in 7.5 years. And I'm burnt out. And so I drive over to the house, otherwise known as walking down the hall, to my wife, and in tears, and I'm just absolutely destroyed. What are we doing? Why am I doing this? I don't understand it. I built this thing so that I can have everything that they tell you can have, all the freedom, all the, I'm not tied down to anything, and I'm working 80 to 100 hours a week. This isn't fun. Hired a consultant to help me kind of think through and figure out what's the next step. We decided the next step would be to actually try and hire people and grow the company and turn it from this lifestyle business into an actual enterprise, into some kind of company with employees. So I hired my first employee, which was extremely difficult because my wife had quit her job. We were making money, but we weren't flowing in it. And it was amazing. I went from 80, 100 hours a week to 80, 95 hours a week, which, amazing what you could do with those 5 extra hours. And that was about 4.5 years ago. So the last 4.5 years have just been going from that to the next guy, trying to figure out this, just super startup-y, really small, tight, busting your butts, figuring it out kind of stuff. Experimenting, testing, failing, experiment, test, fail, and then just starting to scale it because that's what you're supposed to do, right? So started to scale the business, and little by little, we grew. We got up to 13 people last year in Denver. We're 26 now in Denver. If you include, we're 27. We have one other employee and then a bunch of contractors. We're about 35 people now. So. Bigger Pockets is just a massive community. We get thousands of new forum posts every day now. We have the biggest real estate podcast in the world. It's a top 15 business podcasts in the world. We do about 150, 200,000 listens a show on the podcast. We have a publishing business, so we put out books to help educate people in various areas of real estate and personal finance. And that's amazing, incredible business that just continues to scale up. And then on the platform itself, so we've got a community, we put out just oodles and oodles, that's a terrible word, gobs of content, tons of content, trying to help people to build their own financial independence through real estate investing. And we also build tools. So it's been a journey, and I hope that answers.
Yeah. So you touched on a few things that I want to dive deeper on, especially for some student entrepreneurs that we have in the audience and who will be watching this afterwards. The culture around startups, especially for millennials and university students, often boils down to what they call now the grind. Which is what you were just talking about for 7.5 years. You got burnt out after that. Now, do you have any kind of commentary on the grind and what students should be aiming for in that regard?
Sure. So, first thing is don't do what I did. First piece of advice: don't not take a vacation. That's really stupid. Seriously, worst mistake I ever made was not finding time for myself. The realization I had when I hired the consultant was, well, I didn't realize anything. I needed somebody to help me realize something. So I realized I was unhappy, and I needed help figuring out why I was unhappy. And so what they helped me to realize was I was so in the grind. I was so in the business, in the details of the day-to-day, dealing with all the, just do it, go. I never stopped to kind of step back and look at it from 1,000 feet up. And as that realization 4.5 years ago, probably one of the most important tipping points in my life, what I've come to realize since then is most businesses that have an opportunity to grow but aren't growing fail to get past that point because they're so stuck in the business. They fail because either they don't realize that they are so stuck in the business. The other thing is a lot of them don't necessarily have the systems or tools to actually grow or the knowledge to be able to do that. But I think the biggest thing is actually not realizing that you are so in the grind, so in that day-to-day, that you don't ever step back and step out of it. And I was there, and while I was in it, it was like, oh, I got to do this, right? And what you don't realize is, if I don't do those things, you'll still be fine. The company will still be fine. So on that question, what I would tell everybody listening and watching is there's a book. It's called The One Thing. Has anyone read it? All right, a few of you guys. If you haven't, you should read it. It basically, and I'm going to totally butcher it, but essentially look at where you want to go, and then you kind of work backwards and you say, hey, what one thing do I have to do next that makes everything else that I could be doing right now pretty much irrelevant? I don't know if that it's a bit of a butchering, but I think that kind of captures it. So it's, what is so important that I have to do next that all the other day-to-day little things that I might be doing becomes irrelevant. If you do that, and if you kind of run your business in that way, it's incredibly powerful.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that insight.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
One of the related to this grind and whatnot is kind of like the idea of I'm gonna go raise money.
Yep.
Or I'm gonna go just do it myself, which sounds like what you did.
Yep.
And I think the opposite story to the grind is I'm gonna do something really fast and really splashy and hopefully get funding in 6 months. Did you consider trying to raise outside money? Can you talk a little bit about that kind of decision? Because I think it's a critical one that most people early on have to think about.
So I did not. I have perseverated about it for many, many years. Still, to this day, have perseverated about it. I think the first thing that people need to do is stop. Our culture and the media around startups and all the energy and the news and everything else, what we're getting inundated with are these waves that are telling us, like, you have to build $1 billion business. If you do not build $1 billion business, you are a failure. If you go and you listen to all the big startup guys in the Valley, all the big startup guys in New York, many of the big startup guys here in town, pretty much anywhere and everywhere you go, that is what they're gunning for. That is what the mindset is. That is what the VCs want. That is what the angels want. That's what everybody wants, right? Hey, we all got to be billionaire. Well, come on. It's ridiculous. Who in this room is going to be a billionaire? None of us are, right? And if this room had 100 people or 1,000 people, none of us are going to be billionaires, right? And so instead of saying, hey, I'm going to go build this billion dollar business, I'm going to go be a billionaire, what kind of business do you want to build? Like, stop and think about that, because building something with the pipe dream that you're going to be a billionaire is going to leave you very disappointed in your career. I think that would be my first kind of piece of advice is get realistic in terms of what you want to accomplish. What's going to make you happy? Are you going to be happy with a company that makes 5, 10, 15 million bucks a year? You walk away a couple $1 million a year. I don't know about you, that's a pretty good life. It's a pretty good life. If you're ambitious, maybe you want more, and but there's a line, right? And where is that line? And I think what a lot of people do is they chase and they chase and they chase. And what I'm discovering over the last couple months, as I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs about where they're going, it's the FOMO. They're chasing like, hey, I need more money, or hey, I gotta get to this next thing. And it's like this artificial, ridiculous pressure that you gotta keep going for something that may not even be there, right? If you build a successful business, you built a successful business. Everything doesn't have to look this way for it to be successful. And I think, again, more people need to talk about that. More professors need to be. I'm not saying people are saying the opposite here, but I think that needs to be the case in school. That needs to be, the media is not going to change, but I think at least if people can hear it from folks like me and kind of come forward with a path that something realistic, I think it'll help you a lot. And I forgot the second part of the question
Me too.
If anybody else from the audience wants to chime in, feel free to ask a question at any time. But something that you said really interested me. After doing the grind yourself for 7.5 years, you started to build a team. And a lot of our student startups on campus are in that phase too of building a team and surrounding themselves with the people that they're going to build their company with. What was your strategy around choosing your team members and building your team, and how did you go about that? Because now that you're at 35 people, that must been a significant challenge and focus point for you.
Yeah. So when I started this, I didn't start it because I wanted to build a company. I started it because I don't want to pay some scumbag a lot of money so I could stop screwing up in my business, right? I mean, that was why I started it. So I didn't have an intention of building a team or anything like that. It became necessary to do that because I got outclassed by myself in terms of code. I was I was a hack and I was able to get what I needed to get done. But then I got to a point where if I wanted to continue to grow what I was building, I actually had to hire somebody who was smarter than me in coding. So my first venture in that was hiring a contractor through a site called Odesk. Today it's called Upwork, and it's just an offshoring site. And actually, that's not true. I ended up hiring a local guy in California who had a team in India. And slick sales guy, really good, could talk it up, and I didn't know really much about how things worked, and he had this whole team, and it was very impressive, and so I gave him my money. I was going to build MySpace. You guys know what MySpace is?
Yeah.
I was going to build the MySpace. I was going to build the MySpace for real estate investors. This was like after a year in, it was the hot thing, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do this, and so I hired these guys, and 6 months later, I'd get back a chunk of code that didn't work. I mean, the entire thing was non-functional, and I didn't know enough to know how to fix it. I couldn't work with the team. They were thousands of miles away, and the guy that I trusted just burned me, and so I blew through a ton of money, that I had plowed into this on my own, and was ready to quit. I'm glad I didn't. But when it came to hiring the first employee, what I did was I actually hired a guy who was a success from my community. So my first employee was one of our biggest success stories, and obviously most people don't get the ability to do something like that. But what I would say for hiring, we're really careful in hiring. I think the first thing, especially in the early days, you're married to these people. So hire somebody that you want to be married to. Hire somebody that you are able to be completely transparent with, somebody that you trust implicitly, somebody that you can cry in front of, somebody that is not going to judge you, somebody that you're going to be completely open with in terms of the truth on how you feel, where you're at, and vice versa. You want that from them. You want somebody that, this is going to be, you're going to fight with this person. You're going to battle. You guys are going to disagree. And if you can't disagree in a way that makes you comfortable, then you've got the wrong partner. So, whether it's a partner or whether it's, first hires, I think that's probably the best advice I have. But, we've had a few bad hires. Those came with hiring for skill and not personality. Those came with looking at the resume and putting it above everything else and putting it on a pedestal and saying, oh, we so desperately need this right now. And then we acted desperate, and we actually hired without, hey, this guy's not a match in this, and this, but they can really do this one thing that we want to hire them for. And every time we've done that, it's been a bad hire. And so, looking for people who, I will openly say I thought culture was bullshit. I thought it was bullshit as recent as probably 3 years ago. Today, I can't tell you how important I think it is. Bless you. And we've created a really, really, bless you again, rigorous process for hiring, because we want people, we have a no asshole rule at the company, blanket no asshole rule, but it's got to be a good personality match. It has to be. If I spend all day with you, I spend more time with you than I do with my family. So I've got to, I've got to like you. I've got to be able to work with you. I have to be able to disagree with you. I want to, and that doesn't mean hiring people that look like you. That doesn't mean hiring people who think like you. It just means hiring people who you can get along with, that you can disagree with, because frankly, you shouldn't hire people who just think like you. You want people who are going to challenge you and battle you, and you want people, you want different culture, you want different race, you want different religion, you want people coming in. Well, it's also illegal to do otherwise, but you actually, for us, we push really hard for diversity. It's super important. It really, really helps create just a vibrant community within your company. But yeah, so, we look for good people, we look for the talent, but frankly, I'd rather hire somebody who's not quite, this guy here is an A+, but kind of a dick, right? This guy is an A-, but he's going to hustle. I'm going to hire the A- guy who's going to work his butt off than hire the A+ guy who's a dick. Mm-hmm. That's just me, though.
Quote you on that.
Did I wrong choice of words?
No. I just looked at it and put that on the wall.
And so you may have just touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious. A lot of entrepreneurs and speakers that you hear from the Valley or from New York, they talk about how their hiring process or how their methodologies changed from their first hire to wherever they are. So from first hire to 20th hire, what changes in your process or what you look for?
First hire, I was scared to death, so it had to be perfect. 5th, 7th, 8th, I mean, it was, I was looking for skills, but I was afraid, like I didn't think I wasn't paying a lot of money, so I was looking for people who had the capacity to work hard and learn and get better at what they were doing. It was thin, right? And so, as we've grown and made more money, we can actually afford now to pay the higher skilled people, the guys that are making better salaries and things like that. So I think it's, first you really have to sell, the early guys, you really have to sell the idea, right? I mean, like they've got to truly, truly believe in you. Even today, I mean, I don't think there's so much competition, 2.3% unemployment here in Colorado. There's 4 other times in history has a state in this country actually achieved 2.3% unemployment. It's actually an unhealthy number, right? It's too low, our unemployment. There's, you go to a restaurant, you may have to serve yourself, right? So hiring is very difficult. Hiring good people is difficult, and it becomes our last 5 hires, 4 out of the last 5 have come from out of state. So it's really challenging finding local people. Again, I'm off on a tangent, totally forgetting what you were going to ask him, but I want to go back to something that you had talked about really quick, because you had mentioned VC versus raising money. It just hit me. As you hit 40, things start to just kind of do this, just freestyle a little bit. I thought about raising money, never did. I love the idea of bootstrapping because you don't have somebody, as an entrepreneur, you don't have a boss, right? I was always hyped up by it's sexy to raise money because, if you raise money, suddenly you're going to get on TechCrunch, right? That's cool. That's what we all want. We all want to be on TechCrunch. Well, I've actually never been on TechCrunch. But, the idea of raising money, you have to be prepared to have a boss, and you have to be prepared to have a boss that's going to be able to fire you. If you want to be fired from your own company, or you want the prospect of being fired from your own company, that's just one of the things that comes with taking other people's money that most people don't realize. It's cool, it's great, hey, you've got all this money, and then you have to actually do something with it and get returns for that person, and if you don't do what you promised you're going to do, you're going to lose your job. And lose your own company, and I know a lot of people who have. And so as sexy as it is to go and take money and be famous in TechCrunch and have all your friends admire you, there's also a downside, which is, you have a boss. And, for us, I have not had the pressure of, hey, you got to hit these numbers, you got to do that. I mean, I have internal pressures of doing that stuff, but, if we miss, we miss. It's fine, and we're going to keep growing and we're going to keep scaling. So I don't know. That's kind of my advice. Is again like all the hype. You're going to hear a lot of there's a lot of hype out there, and be aware of it from me, because that's just kind of I've seen it. It'd be great if I can take a couple more $1 million. I probably couldn't put too much of it to use right now, because I think we're still finding our way. Our teams are starting to connect and come together. I don't want to hire another 10, 20 people. I think it'll cause a lot of problems for us. That's just some of the stuff you have to kind of weigh is, hiring too fast, growing too fast, being organic, having money versus, organically doing it. I mean, if you can build a company without taking anyone's money, first of all, you own 100%, which is kind of nice. I mean, you may have to give some to your people. And you don't have a boss, and you really have a lot of freedom. Now, on the other hand, if you can't hustle your way to getting there, you may want to think about, taking somebody's money, particularly if you're doing like some kind of industrial design type of stuff, or physical products obviously require more capital than creating an internet site with content, information tools, whatever it is, or apps, things like that.
So one of the upsides of taking money, though, can be, really strong advisors and resources that investors can provide. How have you created an advisory board or resources with that sort of strategy?
That is a great upside for raising money. So not all downsides. There's also upsides. I struggled with that, to be honest. For a while, I wanted to take put together an advisory board, and I didn't actually want to give them a piece of the company, because in my mind it was, hey, I'm going to get this guy who's going to give me 5 to 10 hours a year, maybe a quarter, and they're going to get a point, a quarter point, half point, several points. I thought that was crazy, and I actually never ended up bringing anyone on. In retrospect, I've kind of built my own advisory board, non-specific to the company. So what I've done is I've gone and found other entrepreneurs, bootstrapping, and guys who've raised money, and we've just kind of built our own network. And so, if I have a question or an issue, I'll call up John. If I have a question about this, I'll call Bill, and we'll talk it through, think it through. But to your point, having that advisory board, I think, is, especially in the early days of a new company, I mean, it would have been priceless. It would have cut my path down dramatically.
Yeah, well, great. Thanks for that. Something that I'm really interested in and is drawing on some of your expertise around community building. You've built this platform for real estate investors that brings together over 700,000 people. And a lot of our student startups on campus, our student companies, they're working to build communities around their product or their company. And so I was curious if you could talk a little bit about what it takes to build that community, and what are some of the most important aspects to that?
So in terms of building a community, everybody's got a community, right? You go down to Chick-fil-A, hey, check out our community, right? Domino's, check out our community. The little restaurant over there has got their community, right? I mean, every restaurant, every store, every company has a community. Well, that community is like either a blog where they get no comments, or 2 comments, or 6 people come in, ask a question, or they go to they have a Facebook page, right? I'm pretty critical when it comes to communities, because that's one of the things that I take a lot of pride in, that I think we've done a really, really good job in. So I believe you don't have a community until there's not only a conversation between the customer and the company, but between the customers themselves. I think once that happens, that's when a community has actually been created. And I'd say there's very few actual thriving communities out there, period, relative to everyone who says that they have a community. How did we get there, I guess? And what advice can I offer?
Yeah.
So getting the tipping point in our community was the day that I did not have to participate for it to continue living. And that took years and easily over 10,000 hours of my time fully focused on building that community for that to happen. That's crazy. That's crazy. I think potentially if I had resources, that might have come sooner, but frankly, I've talked to VCs, and I've talked to angels, and I talked to big, smart people out in the tech world, and, in those years, and they told me I was crazy for trying to establish this community and create a community, which was the heart of my business. They said it's great for a lifestyle business, but as a company, a community at the hub is kind of crazy. And I think most people aren't trying to use a community as the hub. I think most people are trying to use community as a means to get more engagement towards the brand. And even that's a challenge, I think, because how do you get people kind of interacting and communicating? The first few users, for the first few being hundreds or thousands, was literally me just going to other non-directly competing communities. So I'd go to like forums about web design, and I'd hang out there, and they'd all have these off-topic areas, and I'd participate in the web design stuff because that's what I was interested in. And then in the off-topic areas, I'd wait for somebody to mention real estate or personal finance, and then I'd jump in and answer. And then I'd have a little signature below, and talk to Bigger Pockets community, and they would click it and inevitably come over, and they'd start interacting with me and my friends who were helping me to, at least be the early users of our site. And at some point, there was enough kind of intercommunication where I can finally step back and, whoa, this thing's living and breathing. Like, I don't have to actually, we kind of set the framework, we set the rules, and now the members are enforcing the rules. The members are, are taking pride in what it is that we've become. But I think for building a community, and it really depends on the type of product that you have, the type of company. Podcasts are incredibly powerful if you can build a podcast around the subject area that you're building a business on. We did it on a lark when we started. I mean, I was always into podcasts, but like, we'll have 6 people who listen to this thing, and we get a lot more than that. And the podcast tends to drive the most new users to our platform now because they've come to trust us. They've come to know who we are and know what our brand represents. And that gives them the peace of mind to come in and actually trust and start to engage. We've got a blog where we put out an absolute ton of top-notch content, best in class for our space, and that drives people to not only ask us questions, they start to interact, and then again, that builds trust for them to come in and say, hey, you know what, I'm willing to join this platform and try it out. And then for us, we've got the forums, which are at the heart of the social network and everything else, and having the forums that are open so that anybody can come in and learn from us without having to go through some kind of firewall. It's just, hey, it's free. You want to learn, you want content, you want knowledge, you want to learn what it is that we're here for, we're not going to charge you anything. Like, learning knowledge is free, and we're going to give you the best in class. And that's given us such a great reputation. The community started to kind of rally around it. And from there, now we can actually build products, tools, services, and things like that to better monetize. Mm-hmm.
So you have you have a lot of expertise in social media, publishing, podcasts. You've been a speaker at many events and conferences. How do you use some of these channels to enhance your community and keep it growing?
So, I mean, the social media tools or the speaking or all that.
Yeah. Just how does it all combine to grow your community? What's your strategy around it?
So my strategy in doing this stuff and speaking is generally, I wish somebody would have told me all those things that they never told me. Well, I would like to be that person that hopefully tells people those things that you may not have heard or you may not know. I get personal gratification out of it, and if one person here is like, oh, what you do sounds interesting outside of all the other stuff that you're talking about, then cool, we got another user. I don't do this to build our audience. I don't think it's a good use of resources. We have, last month we had 1.7 unique visitors, 1.7 million unique visitors to our platform, plus the podcast, plus all of the books and all the other channels and YouTube and videos and all this other stuff. And so, if 6 people aren't going to change my business, right? Mm-hmm. So, or there's more than 6 in here, but You get the point. So me going in and doing that doesn't. It's hey, can I create a relationship with somebody who potentially may be a partner, or find a potential mentor, or somebody that I can mentor, or just help some people who need help. In terms of social media, honestly, I've got a social media guy at the company now, and so occasionally I'll share stuff, but social media is not just like sharing a tweet, it's not just sharing a Facebook, it's engaging, it's really getting to know, it's about networking is really what it is. It's so, if you want to create a viable social media plan, you need to know everybody in your industry. And that's why going to events is important, and that's why Twitter and Facebook and Insta and all that crap is important, right? Because you want to become that expert, right? If you're the expert, if you're the heartbeat of that world that you're in, whether it's I built a pillow business, or I built an app for foodies, seafood, you are can you become that expert in that world of pillows, and the expert of food, and as you do that, your industry starts to kind of come to you, right? Things start to come towards you, and then the other thing along that is most people have this me mindset, which is I want, and in order to be successful in social, you have to give, and you have to not be afraid to share secrets, right? In the early years, a lot of people were like, what are you doing? You're like outing all these secrets of the industry, and that's not cool. Well, it wasn't cool for them because it threatened them, but overall, the secrets were bullshit. There was no secrets. They just, hey, this guy packages this secret in this way. This guy packages this secret in this way. I mean, we're not exposing, in private industrial stuff. We're not doing any of that crap. But it's hey, information is information, and it's out there, So if we can go and, share this other company's great article, it's not going to hurt me. It actually builds trust for me, because people in my industry are like, wow, that guy's willing to share information of somebody that's actually in some ways competitive to him. But what that does is it actually creates this hub. And we become the hub where people are like, oh, well, they're sharing that, I'm going to go there for all the information in the industry, and you start to build that kind of brand, that reputation.
Mm-hmm. So on that same topic, there's this craze within the startup community, and we often hear it referenced by university students and the like, is this idea of growth hacking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering if you could comment a little bit about growth hacking, and then furthermore, how do you sustain the growth that you've seen in your business now and in the future?
Cool. We sustain it by growth hacking. Growth hacking is just a fancy way of saying try and shit out. I mean, that's pretty much what growth hacking is, at least as I've come to know it. It's it's being analytical. It's using data to actually support decisions, but growth hacking is trying stuff. I mean, we growth hacked when we wrote our first book and put it out. It's experimenting. It's testing. It's not being afraid to fail. We started the podcast, growth hacked. Hey, cool, let's try this. And now suddenly we have numbers, and we can take those numbers and we can tie them to other KPIs. And how does this interact with this? I see growth hacking as just a fancy way of saying being experimental, testing, being willing to take chances, being willing to take risks and try stuff out. But whilst doing that, actually measuring that which you're doing, so that you can come to conclusions instead of just saying, yeah, we think it worked, or yeah, we think it failed. Well, you can't just think it worked or think it failed. You have to actually know whether it worked or failed, and the way you do that is by using data. And so, I mean, that's growth hacking, is data plus trying shit out. You heard it here.
For your like initial strategy is very similar to what the Reddit founders did. It seemed like with they were populating the site for months on end before like the conversation between the customers started happening. But it seems like what you've been able to do is build like kind of a community to also find your product market fit, where your community kind of tells you what products are there. So I'm just curious what's the first indicator of product market fit, and was that the initial plan was to build like a baseline to then figure out what tools would work, or what was kind of the strategy surrounding that?
Cool. I've got the same shirt. I wore it yesterday. Mandrill. Love them. So product market fit. So I'm very different than most because I didn't actually start with a strategy, right? And so everything I did was organic, and so.
Was it a dumpster fire? Or you just like?
It was a bit of a dumpster fire, but like I've waded through it, just like we will too wade through this dumpster fire that we are experiencing. But product market, having a community today is one of the most powerful things that we have in terms of allowing us to continue to refine product market fit. Average company has to go and spend a whole lot of money in order to get, I'm totally blanking out on them. Groups, what are they called? No. Holy smokes. Your test, you go in a room, oh my. Focus groups. Jeez Louise. Focus groups. It's dragging. Focus groups are really expensive. Getting data from users is really, really a challenge for most people. We have the ability to say, hey guys, we're going to toss this out there. Tell us if you like it or you hate it. The best piece of advice I got on that came, I don't remember who it came from, but was that you always, especially in the early years, you need to interact and engage every single user, every single customer. And I did this, I didn't think about it, I just did it because I wanted to figure out what I was doing. So, if you've got an app, obviously you're collecting some kind of email, you're collecting some means to communicate with them. Whatever the business you're doing, if you're not collecting information on who your customers are, you're already 38 steps behind. That's your first step. But you want to reach out to every new customer, every new user, and talk to them. I think that is hands down the best piece of advice I ever got. It's hands down one of the best things we ever did, and it's hands down one of the best things we continue to do, which is reach out, communicate, and talk to people. Because what you'll realize is it's like politics. They talk about this White House bubble, this Washington bubble. There's a bubble within your company that you don't realize. And you're like, oh, I'm my customer. I get them. I know them. I understand them. No, you don't. No matter what you think, you don't know your users until you actually talk to your users. And you may know them, that one persona, but there's going to be lots and lots of personas. And so you could imagine what this persona is, but you can't imagine the mentality of all the personas. And so the only way to get that is to talk to your people. And so does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then also how did product market fit feel, or what was the indicator that you're like, well, we might actually have
traction?
Yeah.
I think traction is what you define it to be. So, I've got 750,000 members who've registered with me. Is that traction? I mean, for me, that's phenomenal traction. Facebook would say 750,000 members is bullshit, right? I mean, they don't care about 750,000 users. So what traction is what you define it to be, right? So you have to set, hey, I'm creating widgets. Well, how many widgets do I actually need? Is it a profitability mark? Is it a user mark? Is it, what is that mark that we're going to shoot for? And you can't have 50 of them because that doesn't work. You pick 1, 2, some people go 3, 4, 5. That's probably getting a lot of different things that you're shooting for, but 1 or 2 things that you're gunning for, and you gun for them. But I don't, product market fit is when you start to hit that. Tesla is building this new car. Does Tesla have product market fit? I think they do.
A bunch of people put money down beforehand.
Yeah.
More than they thought they would.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
but what percentage of the vehicle market do they have? It's tiny, right? But we all want a Tesla, don't we? I think they got product market fit. Is it, have I gotten this much of the total marketplace? Is it, if it was that, I don't think they're there. I don't think Musk would say they've achieved it yet, because surely he wants 5, 10, 20% of the market. But have they achieved it? Sure they have.
Great. Well, thank you for that insight. I think we have another question over
Yeah,
here.
I had a question. You mentioned how you started off investing. It was a bad investment with your property. Now that you have all these tools at your disposal and you've created this platform, are you investing in, or how's that
Sure. So remember where I said I was working 80 to 100 hours a week on my business? I also had a wife and I have 3 kids. And so what happened was investment, company, family. And for me, at the time, I said, well, where are my odds the greatest? I've got traction on this company. My wife and my kids need my time. Something's got to go. So I actually ended up getting out of real estate at the time, and I've been dying to get back in. I've been passively investing in real estate through other things, but right now I'm looking to get in, looking for opportunities in multifamily, but I'm personally not actively buying houses, flipping houses, buying rental properties. For me, it makes more sense to invest my time and energy into the business than focus on that, which is interesting because a lot of people are like, well, Josh, you've got this real estate and thing and you're not doing, and the answer is, I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm capable of doing, and I know where the best use of my own personal resources are. And if I'm doing 2 things and trying to split my energy, I'm not going to do either one well. So coming to that realization was really powerful for me, because I was doing that for so long. I was half-assing this. In fact, when I was in the first 8 years of the company, I did 23 different jobs. And do you know how many of those I did really, really well? When you're split, when your attention's split, we all think that we can, do 16 different things and multitask. Science has kind of proven that we're not really good at it. So I know that I'm not good at it, so I'm not. But now what's nice is as we've grown and scaled, I'm obviously not working 80 to 100 hours a week anymore. Well, maybe not obviously, because I know a lot of really successful people who are doing really, really well who still do that, which I think is crazy. But now I have a lot more time, so I'm actually actively trying to find opportunities again.
Great. Well, I think we're approaching on the hour that we want to keep this to, so I want to pose just kind of a final overarching question is, you describe yourself as a product specialist with expertise in a bunch of different areas, anywhere from publishing, social media, and podcasting, and we're all told that there's no one path to get to any destination. But for students who see a personality like you and think, what, that's something I could see myself as. What are your parting kind of words of wisdom, and how do you what's your advice for students to get to a place like yours?
I think you've got to be creative. You have to at least, I think there's lots of ways to do it. First of all, don't listen to me and don't listen to anyone else. You have to listen to yourself. Everything I say is great, but it works for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you, right? And so I think that's where a lot of people screw up is hey, but so-and-so is doing this. Actually looking at your mandrel shirt, I remember back in the 5-6 years ago, we were doing news. We were probably before that doing our newsletter, and all the research, all the smartest internet marketers at the time were saying, hey, you've got to send your emails. Science tells us, data tells us that the best date to send a newsletter is on a Tuesday morning, and the best time to send it is I don't know what it was, 8 a.m., 9 a.m. You don't send it Monday because of this. You don't send it Wednesday because of this. You don't send it Thursday because of this. And there's all these reasons not to do all this stuff. And I was like, wow, well, Tuesday is actually probably our best day for traffic. If I sent it and it's really successful Tuesday, that's great, but my worst day of traffic is Sunday. I'm going to send a newsletter on Sunday. And it turned out to be a brilliant move because now, what was my worst day turned out to become then my best day in traffic. And it allowed us to kind of start to even out the traffic, these wicked, nasty patterns that we used to have in weekly traffic change. And for what I needed, that we ended up adding a Tuesday newsletter inevitably. We had a Sunday, then a Thursday, and then we added a Tuesday. So now we have 3 days a week. And frankly, the Tuesday newsletter is no better than the Sunday. In fact, the Sunday is still a more successful newsletter than the Tuesday one was. But so we're all inundated with like, hey, this awesome website that knows everything about everything says that you have to do it this way. Well, that's great. You should read it and you should absorb it, and then you should look for other opinions. And even if they all say the same thing, you should still question it. So, I think my best advice to you guys is question everything, including me. Don't take anything that anyone says as a rule, because there are no rules. Back to growth hacking. Rules are out the window. You got to just try stuff and experiment, because again, what works for this guy is not necessarily going to work for you. To product, I think that's what you have to do. Come up with an idea that you're passionate about, something that you really care about, and something. In order to be successful as an entrepreneur, I believe you have to have some kind of passion, because if you're putting energy behind something that you're not passionate about, you will burn out. And in all those difficult moments and all those challenges that come up, and they inevitably will, you're going to say, I don't care about it that much. And those are the moments that are going to make your company. And those moments may not be in year 1 or year 2 or year 5 or year 7, right? I mean, I almost walked in year 1 and year 2 and year 3 and year 4 and year 5 and year 6 and year 7 and year 8. I mean, I almost walked multiple times in each of these early years for a variety of reasons. And the only thing kept me going was the passion for our users and the passion for what we had built. And so if you don't have that, if you don't care, then come up with something else. And then in terms of just like the product itself, solving a problem that bugs you is a really, really good way to find a business idea. I mean, that was what I did. I've got a few other tricks up my sleeve for future companies with things that really, really piss me off that nobody's solving still. So I've got a book of future businesses that I'm excited to get into at some point. And if not, maybe find somebody who's got an idea. Find somebody whose idea you can get passionate about. But if you just like, oh, well, yeah, my mom mentioned this. Yeah, I'll try that. You're probably not gonna care. And then the last thing is, it's okay to just have one pizzeria. And if you guys understand what that means, like, you don't have to build a tech company that's going to do this. You can build a restaurant that makes you a nice income that is going to keep you happy for the rest of your life and take care of you and your family. That's great. That's amazing. And unfortunately, again, the tech media and all this other stuff plays down all this, those types of businesses. And I would say don't discount that. There's a lot of opportunity, and maybe you buy that little rundown pizza shop and you turn that into the next huge franchise. Maybe that's your path, or maybe your path is to have one restaurant. We talk about this a lot with our community in real estate. Everybody wants to be the next real estate magnate, right? Well, you've got kids, you're 22, you're 38, you're, different places, different ages, different perspectives. What works for you may not work for the next person. What strategy works for you may not work for the next person. So find that strategy and that path that works for you. And most importantly, the last parting word is forget about everyone else. We are far too consumed in our society with what everybody thinks of us, We are far too consumed in our society about, what the right way and the right idea, and you're going to be judged. You're judged right now. When we walk in this room, we all judge each other. We're all constantly judging. You guys got to get past that. It's like, I know far too many people who've allowed what other people think of them or their idea or whatever it is to affect their life path, their business, their entrepreneurship, anything and everything. Like, find your happiness is probably one of the piece of advice that hopefully resounds with you guys. But like, if you can't find your happiness, your business or your job is not going to do that for you. You have to figure out what's going to make you happy, and you have to stop letting all the extraneous inputs and all the judgment of your peers. Oh, my friend's successful and he's making all this money, and oh, my friend's got this great wife and these great kids. We all go at our own rate. So like, stop letting all that stuff affect you, and stop letting all that stuff drive how you go about doing things. We all go at our own path. Find your path and go with it.
Cool. Well,
So-
thank you for all that insight, Josh. That was great.